I'm Sarah Traver. I think all of you know these two amazing women, Erica Rosenfeld and Jessica Julius. We are incredibly proud to have your show. And the show title is Between the Edge of Reflection. And you guys will walk us through and tell us a little bit more about it. Before we get started, I just want to say it's been so fun to work with you both for the last week. It's been like
it's been so much.
I know. Can we do it?
Yeah. Many hours working on very detailed, very meticulous, very beautiful installations. And yeah, I just can't, I couldn't be more proud to like have this show.
This must be the guy that Morley lives with.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. And we've talked about it, you know,
That's her.
team. We have Deb, we have
I don't
Julian,
know.
we have Tony. We have such an amazing team here, and it's been such an amazing experience.
It's been very relaxing, and it can sometimes be stressful, but this was really chill.
Yeah.
It was
For the most part.
Yeah.
Here and there.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
Wearing a mask.
So maybe we could just get started by telling everybody a little bit about how this show came to be. I know you've been friends and collaborators for a very long time, best friends, BFFs, for a long time.
Say that.
But this is both of your individual work together in an exhibition for the first time.
Yeah.
So can you just tell us kind of how you conceived of this and what the inspiration was?
Well, I think, you know, Erica and I have collaborated for over 10 years.
Since 2007.
Exactly, 2007. And we've never had the opportunity to show our individual work, but we've always found so much connection and crossover in what we do, and have been each other's like biggest supporters. And so this has been a long time coming. We've talked about showing together for, I mean, how long? For a really long time.
But it made sense this time, I think. I mean, I think our work always makes sense together in some way. We're both sort of obsessive compulsive people and put it into our work most of the time in our work. But also with the themes we were thinking about, we're both thinking a lot about fear in these bodies of work. So it just made sense. Besides aesthetically, I think it works really well together. But we found it interesting that that was.
Yeah. And then after this year of COVID, I think, you know, I mean, this was the longest that I haven't seen you. And you know what, 2 years
except
now.
on Zoom drinking every Saturday night during quarantine. But other than that, like not in person and collaborating. And so it felt like, you know, everything was up in the air, things are getting canceled, things are rescheduled. I mean, this is around the world. And so to be able to do this, to come here together, it's, you know, it's really been a special experience on many different levels. So. Yeah. And we're used to collaborating. Sometimes we can finish each other's sentences when we're talking about work. We understand each other really well. We're artistic soulmates. And yeah, it's just, this was an amazing thing to be able to look forward to in the darkest time in our history to have something. So that's another reason we're really happy to be here.
Yeah. And you know, it's fortunate too for us. This is a big exhibition, and you guys put an enormous amount of work into it. And it feels especially special to be able to have also our first public opening coincide with the opening of your show. And so tonight, after we get off of the Zoom call, hopefully we get a nice big room full of friends and family.
The edge for ourselves of always pushing ourselves to that point where we're always searching for something, but we're also on an edge between different, you know, sculpture, art, design, these kind of different ways of making and thinking. And then reflection means multiple things. This is a year of reflection. We were really reflecting on, you know, kind of ourselves as makers and thinkers, where we are in the world, what we're doing. But then we also were thinking about how there is a lot of like physical reflection in what we do in glass, And so there's the reflection within like Erica's clouds or within some of these pieces, you know, so again, always kind of going into these things in different ways. And it was important to have a kind of a poetic title that just summed up multiple ways we're thinking about making and being artists.
And I think both of us, because the work is so labor intensive and you could spend, I don't know, 100 hours on one piece or more.
Yeah.
A lot of it begins with just a freedom of making, and then comes the reflection of what's going on in the work. And yeah, definitely, I agree with how much reflection we've all done in the past year and a half. And if you haven't reflected, then you might be a sociopath. Fair point.
Yeah. Point taken.
That's great. Well, so I would love to actually like walk through the exhibition and show everybody this incredible feat. Maybe we can start down at the end, Erica, with your work.
Maybe. Okay. So this piece, or this salon style wall, is called Journey to Hypnopompia. And most of these paintings were done in 2020, starting in quarantine, and then through 2021. But it's a body of work that I started really at the beginning of 2017, when I felt that the political climate in America changed. Wait, sorry. Oh, my mic's off. Oh, okay. Am I good? All right. So I started the work in 2017. I'd always been really fascinated by the mid-century modern phenomena of paint by numbers. So I can imagine that most of you in this Zoom call know what paint by numbers is, but basically I've been appropriating imagery from vintage paint by number paintings and pulling from 2 to 15 paintings, and then basically altering the imagery and collaging it into original works. And I've always loved the genre, but I became really fascinated by the fact that they were invented the same year as McCarthyism and the House of Un-American Activities in 1951. And I kind of looked at the paintings as a window into the culture of the 1950s, and which seemed really analogous to the dystopian horror movie we all started living in 2017. And so basically it was kind of similar. The government was recklessly preying on people's hatred for outsiders and fear of losing their free will and freedoms. And I look at these as a window into that culture where people were sort of mindlessly coloring in shapes that were miscellaneously dictated to them. And I think of them as a way of people finding order and trying to stay in the lines. So I like the idea of changing the context of the subjects in the paintings, from adorable animals into strange creatures or beautiful mutants and pastoral landscapes into peculiar habitats. So that's sort of what happened here.
So do you start, with each one of these, like there's kind of some repeated imagery, for example, the dog.
Yes, yeah.
So are you, you start with that sort of paint by numbers dog form, and then you're just like scaling, adding on, changing, manipulating, is that?
Yeah, like this lemon dog, this is called The Universe Exists in the Lemon Dog's Breath. And if you didn't know. So it's taken from 3 different paintings. Allison, your ring's here. And so the lemons came from one painting, the dog from another, and then the space scene from another, and then I joined them all. So that's, all of them are pretty much. And sometimes I add like this cake duck, that was not a painting of hers, that cake, but I added that in. And I'm not a painter. I was really just doing a coloring book the way that they were intended, just staying out of the lines a little bit more.
Quite a bit. and literally out of the lines, like into 3 dimensions.
And so they describe the journey to Hypnopompia, which we're about to show you, which is a place which is an area of a place called Reverie Forest that I've been talking about in my work for a really long time. And it's sort of a safe zone where all of these beautiful mutants and strange creatures can sort of be themselves and free themselves of the societal constraints that were imposed on them.
I have to say, I totally love that premise. The like, okay, here you have this paint by numbers coloring book, right? It's like, here, you too can make a painting, but it's going to look identical to the painting that your neighbor makes, the guy in New York City makes, the guy in Texas makes, whatever. And you've completely flipped it on its head and made it into exactly the thing it was never supposed to be, which is this like delightful, imaginary, like anything can happen, completely like outside the lines and creative space. And also the way you're appropriating the existing sort of ephemera, I think fits right into that as well. Like all of these little bits and pieces, the beautiful jeweled threads, things that were intended for a particular use or look, and here have been transformed into this otherworldly thing.
It's a good escape.
Yeah, totally.
For me.
You want to show us this big installation?
So this is where all the characters in those paintings are traveling to. It's called Hypnopompia. It's a part of the forest, like I said. Maybe I'll get on the outside so you can tell. But so they basically describe a lot of the characters in those paintings and the forest, but I really named it after a state I felt like I was in during COVID winter. I had spent most of quarantine and COVID feeling pretty fortunate and lucky and privileged and comfortable. And I, like a lot of people, I kind of went into the darkness in around February, which is when I started this piece. But in actuality, I've started this about 30 years ago. I've been collecting these objects for my entire life. But anyway, I started looking into the state that I felt like I was waking up from a dream. So I looked up that state in between dreaming and awake, and it's called the hypnopompic state. And people have auditory, visual, and sensory touch hallucinations, where you could even, you can hallucinate someone in your bed, and they're very vivid hallucinations. So after some really beautiful events and some really dark events that happened in my personal life in the winter, I decided to sort of look at that time period as a hallucination, as a way to move past it. And I think it really began as a love letter to someone that kind of woke me up a little bit and opened my heart in that period of time. And then it really just turned into a place to escape to. And I started working on it, say, the end of February, and finished it last night. Or
Today.
Today, 3 hours ago.
Today.
And yeah, and I had never seen it all together. It was really in my head. Oh yeah.
It's like you have to make it
I
move.
forgot, it just reminded me that some of the characters move. I think we should show her. She might be the queen of Hypnopompia. I'm just gonna blow off the dust because it's annoying. Okay. But she, yeah, let's call her the queen of Hypnopompia. So some of it's interactive, most of it's not. There are hidden interactions, like Yeah, that's about it.
So
Oh, and the wallpaper comes from one of the a repeat of the paint.
I sort of know the answer to this because I've been on Zoom calls with you, but I've never seen it in person. But so your studio space in your house is not dissimilar from what we're looking at
here. Yeah, I mean, my whole house sort of looks like this in a way. But for about 12 years, I spent basically building a very large scale shrine in my studio, which I've since dismantled. But it took about 12 years. It was filled with thousands of objects and drawings and sometimes food I would save. And it was sort of like a container for memories. And a lot of this came from that. So it's really I mean, I've been doing this since I was a kid, building shrines around my rooms, and it just got bigger because my house is bigger.
Yeah. Deb, you may have already gotten this on video, but I just want to point it out because it was something I didn't realize until we had these pieces here in person, like the extraordinary like detail in how these are constructed. So I'm wearing a piece of Erica's jewelry. I think we're all wearing some amount of Erica jewelry tonight. But when I look at these, I just see so clearly like that jeweler's attention to detail and like these things, like they're collaged pieces of things, yes, but the way that you put them together is so extraordinary. Like they're really special sculptural objects. I mean, even the backs of your work is like a beautiful piece of sculpture.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, and this is fabric from vintage tablecloths I've collected that actually Jess and I have used in our collaborative work with an Asphalt family. Maybe they had stains on them, so I cut them up. Oh, it keeps. All right. Anyway, yeah, fabric.
Very cool.
Oh yeah, one more thing, but we should move on to Jess. These are vintage funeral flowers made in France in the 60s. And I really I've been collecting them for, I don't know, a really long time. And I really like the idea of, I never found a use for them. And it really felt like it made a lot of sense right now.
Yeah. It's like we're all living through a dystopian horror movie.
Dystopian horror
movie. And it's the funeral scene. Yeah. Funeral march.
Yeah.
Or we're surviving it.
We're surviving.
We're surviving it.
Yeah. We're surviving.
This is one of those moments.
Vaccinated and surviving.
Jess, where should we start? Do you want to start with?
We could start.
You want to start with the cloud, or you want to start with the drawing?
It's up to you.
Let's start with the cloud since it's kind of right here in the middle and walk through, well, around it.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest maybe walking through it. So this piece has been shown in multiple iterations. I think this is the largest iteration yet so far. It's made of flamework glass and hot shot glass and copper wire that have been fused together. I make a lot of work with systems and mark making and repetition and labor, thinking a lot about communication and how things exist in the world. And so this is one of those installations that it takes up a certain amount of space, but visually it has moments where it disappears. It becomes kind of atmospheric, and I've described it even as like a sneeze, or something that these kind of particles or these other kinds of suggestions, but it also could be a splatter of ink, so I tend to install it around the drawings so that it becomes a layering of mark making and where they start to merge, but then they separate. Thinking about things that are ephemeral and intangible, but also at the same time, very present in their materiality. So, and the reflection too, that's above it, that is a new component of this installation. And what we've noticed about here is that it is pulling in, like even Erica's work, into this. And then there's other moments where it's starting to kind of absorb other things. And I find that interesting, and it relates to some of my other work, my installation work.
It's actually interesting where
Yeah.
I'm standing right now. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's not going to be visible on camera very well, but you have the installation itself, and then it's a reflection of the piece behind it.
Yeah.
But just the part of the piece behind it that looks kind of like
Right.
is really
Yeah,
very cool.
I mean, that's the magic of mirror. You know, it's like we think there's a certain reality to what we're seeing in it, but it's not. It's not the actual tangible, you know, so it's it's our interpretation of what we're seeing. But it can merge things and bring some things together. So
what about these are also incredible pieces here on the wall. Rich, you know, from a distance appear to be like fingerprints or, you know, abstractions or, you know, root system. And then as you approach them, they reveal their sort of component parts, I guess.
yeah.
Can you talk about how you do these and how you kind of came to how you think about these?
Sure. So these are all made out of dry transfer rub-on letters. And so it was an analog thing that people are not really using anymore. They still exist, but I buy them off of eBay. So don't bid on them because I need them. And so what I do is actually transfer the letters onto these surfaces and recreate them. And they started because of I'm dyslexic, and I found that out as an adult. And when I realized I was doing things differently in college than other people, that I had created these other kinds of strategies to kind of understand language and reading. And through dyslexia, I see letters, the spaces in between. I see them as structures. I see them in that communication in different ways. And so this is me. I'm still communicating. I'm not necessarily giving you a narrative, but it's a visual language that I'm reconstructing out of a known system of communication. And so some of these, like this one, is made because when I get them, I may only get one page of one font. And so I have to work within these limitations. And I think that's with all of my work. It's always thinking about what our limitations are in life and making and thinking. And we have to be able to kind of work within them and make success out of those limitations. And so I think this is the largest one that I've made so far. So this 4-foot one over here. And it's made out of various different fonts and types, and sometimes even the kind of dashes and things in between. And this was really a COVID project. You know, this was my escape. This was something that in the studio, when I got to go there, which was not as much as I wanted, but when I got to go there, I would be able to sit there and meditate on many different things in life in making this. And there's an amazing amount of detail in this, and figuring out how different letters and fonts can fit together. And then if you come to this one over here, Deb, this is the actual dry transfer sheets that I've used to make other ones. So it gives you an idea of what happens, when I'm transferring these over.
So the titles of these pieces are awesome, but a little confusing if you don't know why they're titled that way. I love it because it actually, like, there's kind of a poetry in it. It lets your brain just kind of come up with why.
Yeah.
But for the benefit of everybody on the Zoom call, will you explain what the titles refer to?
Sure. So each drawing, this is like, I come up with all these little systems that are kind of hidden systems of making. And maybe all artists do this, I don't know, but they somewhat just make me happy. And it's almost like these secrets that aren't always revealed. And so each drawing is made with a certain like colored pencil or a certain pen or, something. So, like this one's called light green because I used 3 colored pencils that are light green on the dry transfer letters. And at some point, I'm going to take all of these sheets that have, you know, they become almost coated in color.
Mhm.
They're almost like the opposite. They're the other like kind of bookend to these drawings, right?
Yeah.
Like they're so tied together, but they're also kind of approached so differently. So at some point, I'm going to show those in some way, you know. So I don't know if that made sense. Or,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense, particularly when you see the trio here, and you're like, oh, okay, she's rubbing it off with a red pencil.
Yeah. This is like the key.
Yeah.
This is the key piece to, right.
Yes, secret quest.
Yeah.
And then behind Deb here is a whole incredible installation of these crystal pieces, which again, I feel like there's this sort of like hidden substructure to all of the work that's in this show. So you have on the surface these incredible crystals, but how you arrived at these is so interesting.
Yeah. So this piece is called Between Coming and Going. And it was inspired by a poem by my favorite poet, Octavio Paz, that really was speaking about trying to be present in the moment, of thinking about these kind of the moments between life and death and how we exist in the world, which became very relevant this year for my own kind of health reasons, and also because of COVID and other people's health reasons. And so, you know, I was thinking about, you know, the glass objects themselves each have an extracted phrase from this poem. And the glass, I mean, I'm such a glass nerd. I love it. I'm obsessed with it, but it's truly magical. It's reflecting, it's magnifying, it's hiding, it's distorting, you know, it's kind of doing all of those things kind of at once. And so I'm thinking about this piece as a walking poem, as something that has rhythm to it, something that maybe is not your literal narrative story, but it's having these kind of different moments in it. Coming back to different types of systems, and that's where the crystals come in. The crystals come from thinking about how we have belief systems in things. You know, there's a lot of belief systems in a crystal, of that they have healing properties, that they are, you know, that they can produce like a loved one, or you carry this around and it does, you know, it does something else. And there's an element of growth and an element of like control and chaos within the work, which I feel is very poetic. And so that's kind of how I came to starting to piece these together. And the hope is that people will be able to walk along this and extract kind of their own interpretation of these moments and connect to different parts of it.
Well said, Jess.
Thanks, Erica. Yeah.
So we just have a few more minutes on this Zoom call. We said we were just going to go until 4:45.
Right.
So maybe we can just take like maybe another 5 minutes and look at the remainder of the work,
Sure.
and then we'll jump back onto the video and answer any questions that people have, or just chit chat.
All right. Sounds good.
Zebras.
We decided to move the zebra family over here because we love how they look. This is where sort of our work meets.
Like aesthetically, like
aesthetically.
Yeah.
And just zebra family, mother, child, zebra stain, zebra leopards, zebras,
cheetah zebra.
Allison's ring too. These are pearls and marbles, and then this is some blown glass. So there's still glass elements in them. Same deal, paint by numbers, altered, collaged.
You guys obviously have so much fun doing your work. And I can say that because I just lived with you for a week.
Yeah.
And watched it all happen. But it's really like pleasurable to be in this space and like have this sense of discovery as you're walking through. And like, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like a little bit of synesthesia or something, but like you can almost like taste it when you walk into the room. You're like, oh, I just want more of it. Like, what's next? And where are they going to take us next?
There's a lot to look at.
Well, and I think, that's what brought us together, is that there's an element of play in what we do and enjoyment. And we believe that you should enjoy life, like, and what you're doing.
We talk about that a lot, how important play is in life and work. It shouldn't. Sometimes you walk by a glass blowing bench and there's like a pile of broken goblets. This is like the antithesis, I think, to fun. It's just someone getting so upset that something's not perfect, and then they smash it on the floor until you're just like, that was fine. But it's sometimes I think of that as kind of fighting the work, and I don't want to fight with it. I want to enjoy it. And I've been making work since I was a really young child, as a therapy, but as fun too. So it's always going to come from there.
Yeah.
And our collaborative work is extremely fun to do together. So it wasn't a surprise that we had fun.
Just in case there are folks on the Zoom call who don't know about Burnt Asphalt, will you just share a little bit about what you guys do?
Go ahead.
It was an artist collective that we co-founded at Wheaton Arts in 2007 when we met. And it's basically a hybrid of a dinner party, a performance, a happening, and an interactive installation. And it started from cooking food in glass for a very large audience. And now it's evolved into that hybrid I just mentioned.
Yeah. And it's, I think you did a great job. And it's about community, and it's about bringing people together. And so we have gone to many different glass places, like Pittsburgh Glass Center, the Chrysler Museum, Corning,
Urban Glass.
And we bring that community together and work with people. And really,
there are 30 people in it. I mean, over 30 members. It started as 5 and now it's 30.
I think that one of the things that really is connecting is that it's interdisciplinary, and it's about discovery, like what you were talking about. And it really pushes us out of our comfort zone and into other elements of thinking and making.
And we're always so object driven. And it's definitely more like curating an experience for the audience.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is also an experience. So I think that kind of idea is reflected in this, but that's definitely an experience.
And we cook really good food.
It's delicious.
Yeah.
Before we jump back, I just want to point out, because I know I want people to see this part of the exhibition as well. So we've got some of Erica's amazing flowers, which Erica, these are blown glass, but then they also have applied elements, correct?
Yeah, and it's a series I've been working on it's an evolving installation that I started in 2013, and it talks about a dream, and each installation becomes a different incarnation of that dream. So this is the latest incarnation. Raining bunny heads, but a lot of bunny heads aren't in there because FedEx, don't use FedEx.
And then we also have these pieces by Jess, which are quite kind of experimental.
And these are, I make large installations out of bent flamework glass. And so this is taking that chaos and compacting that in a kiln and fusing that down. So I would say it's kind of the most controlled, chaotic pieces I've ever made, if that makes sense. And
tell them the process, because it's crazy.
What about it?
Like, just how many times do you do those fusings?
So I think this piece that Deb is showing you right now was in a kiln for close to 2 months, where I would fire it every other day. Because the firing, it has to go up and then it has to cool down slowly. And then I would add more glass to it, and then it would compact it. So it's this compacting kind of over and over, and this kind of layering. And thinking about like edges, that there's always things behind the surface of something. So if you're on the street and you see the tree roots in like an urban environment, there's always that, you know, that kind of controlled from the cement. And then, but there's always some substructure. It's the same with architecture and like our buildings. We have our drywall, and there's networks behind it, you know. So I was thinking about that act of like layering over and over with these.
That was the catalyst that started this.
Yeah, and then they have a mirror enamel on them. Thank you, Erica.
You're welcome.